the previous chapter, we witnessed the birth of a nation. We saw how King Menes, the unifier, forged two lands into one. Upper and Lower Egypt, once divided by crown and culture, were bound beneath a single authority. The white crown and the red crown became the symbol of something greater than territory. They became the symbol of destiny. But unification was only the beginning. What followed was not immediate grandeur. It was preparation. For generations, Egypt strengthened itself in silence. Kings consolidated power. Administrations expanded. The Nile was measured, taxed, recorded. Fields were organized. Labor was coordinated. Faith was structured. Authority became absolute, not through fear, but through system. An empire does not rise in stone overnight. It rises first in discipline. The early dynasties built more than tombs. They built control. They built continuity. They built belief. Stone began replacing mud brick. Structures grew larger. Confidence deepened. Each reign tested the limits of what could stand against time. Architects experimented. Builders refined. Failures became lessons. Lessons became knowledge. Egypt was no longer learning how to survive. It was learning how to endure. And endurance leads to ambition. Then came the turning point, a moment when stability transformed into audacity, when belief demanded monument, when power sought permanence. The desert west of the Nile waited, vast, empty, silent. It would not remain empty for long. What emerged there would not simply mark a dynasty. It would redefine what humanity believed was possible. Not a palace, not a temple, not a fortress, but a structure so immense, so deliberate, so mathematically controlled, that even after thousands of years, it commands the horizon and the imagination. This was not incremental progress. This was the moment Egypt decided to challenge time itself. This was the era when human will was carved into the earth, the age of the pyramids. And at its center, rising from the Plateau of Giza, stood the most formidable monument ever conceived by human hands. The Great Pyramid. Before Giza crowned the horizon, before geometry carved the desert into eternal lines, Egypt was already dreaming of forever. The Nile rose and fell, teaching rhythm. Its floods spread life, then withdrew, leaving black soil against golden sand. From this pulse of water and sky, civilization learned patience. The Egyptians measured the seasons, traced the stars, and slowly began to measure the world itself. Everything began with a deep pit, covered by a simple flat structure the Egyptians called a mastaba. These mastabas, built of mud brick and stone, marked the earliest tombs, low, solid, and modest, yet profound in meaning. They appeared across Egypt, scattered along the desert's edge, and even beside the plateau that would one day hold the pyramids of Giza. In their simplicity, they declared that memory could be anchored in architecture. It was from this tradition that a revolution emerged. In the dawn of the First Dynasty, 3100 to 2890 BCE, Egypt's kings chose mastabas as their gateways to eternity. Menes, the unifier of the two lands, rested in Abydos, within the sacred necropolis of el-Kab, near Sohag. His tomb was a deep pit of 2 chambers, crowned by sloping mud brick walls and a solemn gateway. No pyramids yet pierced the sky. Memory was still anchored in earth. Through the Second Dynasty, 2890 to 2686 BCE, mastabas continued to guard the kings, while fragile dreams of pyramids flickered, unfinished, but foreshadowing the stone giants to come. And then Egypt dared to rise higher. At Saqqara, under King Djoser of the Third Dynasty, the architect Imhotep transformed the humble mastaba into something unseen before. The result was the step pyramid of Djoser, 6 tiers of stone stacked toward the sky. Clay yielded to limestone. Fragility yielded to permanence. Around 2670 BC, the step pyramid reached 60 meters in height, its base stretching 120 meters. Imperfect, evolving, yet revolutionary. It was Egypt's first declaration that eternity could be built in stone. But Egypt was not done dreaming. Near Beni Suef, Meidum rose. Conceived as a step pyramid, it was reshaped into a true pyramid during the Fourth Dynasty. Some whisper it began under King Huni, the last ruler of the Third Dynasty, a king who stood at the threshold between eras, closing the age of mastabas and early pyramid experiments, and opening the path toward the monumental age of Sneferu and Khufu. Built in the early 26th century BC, Meidum stood bold yet fragile, larger than what came before, yet destined to falter. Today, much of it has collapsed, leaving a haunting silhouette, a monument caught between experiment and perfection. Sneferu's ambition pressed further. At Dashur, he attempted Egypt's first smooth-sided pyramid. The builders began at a steep angle of 54 degrees, but as stresses threatened collapse, they altered the slope midway to 43. The bent pyramid, built around 2600 BC, rose 100 meters high. Its change of angle remains etched in stone, a visible record of adaptation. Much of its limestone casing still survives, gleaming as pyramids once did under the Egyptian sun. Failure did not end the dream. It refined it. Not far from the bent pyramid, Sneferu commissioned the Red Pyramid. Named for the warm hue of its limestone, it was deliberate, confident, assured. Built around 2590 BC, it rose higher and broader than all its predecessors. Inside, ascending corridors led to soaring corbelled chambers. Engineering was no longer experimental. It was mastery. From the Nile Valley to these pyramids stretched ceremonial causeways, stone-paved roads linking river, temple, and tomb. They were not merely pathways, but symbolic journeys. The king's body would arrive by boat, ascend the causeway, and pass into eternity. And so the pyramids rose, one after another, each greater than the last. From Saqqara to Meidum, from Dashur to the Red Pyramid, every monument surpassed the one before it. Higher in stature, broader in base, more refined in design. Each ruler inherited the lessons of his predecessor, and each stone carried Egypt further along its path to eternity. In stone, Egypt was not only building monuments, it was building eternity itself. By the time Khufu ascended the throne, around 2,590 years before Christ, Egypt possessed more than ambition. It possessed knowledge. It had gained experience in quarrying vast quantities of limestone and granite. It had developed an understanding of angle and structural load. It had organized labor forces capable of sustaining national projects. It had a centralized administration able to mobilize resources across the Nile Valley. It had a religious vision that demanded permanence. Egypt was no longer discovering what was possible. It was ready to redefine it. And when the lessons of Saqqara had been learned, when the ambition of Djoser had been tested, when mastery had replaced uncertainty, there remained only one question. How far could a civilization go when nothing about stone intimidated it anymore? At Giza, on the edge of the western desert, that question would be answered, where the sun dies each evening and is reborn at dawn. A vast plateau waited. Giza, chosen not by chance, but by intention. The bedrock beneath was strong enough to bear a mountain. The horizon lay open in every direction. The sky above stretched unbroken, a canvas for eternity. And there, on the threshold between life and afterlife, a vision was inscribed upon the earth: the Great Pyramid. Khufu's pyramid would rise to approximately 146 meters in original height. Its base would stretch approximately 230 meters on each side, covering more than 13 acres of carefully leveled bedrock. It would consist of roughly 2,300,000 limestone and granite blocks. Khufu's pyramid was not only taller, it was wider, heavier, more precise. But these are only numbers. To understand scale, you must feel it. Imagine standing at the base, the stones above you rising layer upon layer, a mountain not carved by nature, but assembled by hands. The air filled with dust, voices shouting in rhythm, sledges grinding across prepared pathways, the sun overhead, relentless. Each block weighed, on average, about 2.5 tons. Some internal granite beams exceeded 50 tons, and yet the difference between the lengths of the 4 sides of the pyramid is no more than a few centimeters. Not meters, centimeters. This was not brute force alone. This was measurement. This was intention. Contrary to ancient legends of chains and whips, the builders were not masses of enslaved captives. Archaeological evidence reveals structured workers' settlements, bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves per day, breweries fermenting vast quantities of beer, storage facilities, barracks, medical care. These were organized labor teams. Farmers worked during the Nile flood season when fields lay beneath water. Skilled craftsmen labored year-round. Stone cutters, haulers, surveyors, engineers. Crews were given names, proud names, such as the Friends of Khufu. This was not oppression. It was participation in a sacred state project. Construction likely lasted between 20 130 years. If we assume 20 years, that would require placing approximately 115,000 blocks each year, more than 300 blocks every day. Picture the coordination required: food distribution, water supply, tool maintenance, transport logistics from quarries near and far. Granite from Aswan, more than 500 miles south, was floated north along the Nile during flood season, carried by wooden barges guided by experienced river navigators. The pyramid was not chaos, it was choreography. Before a single block was lifted, the ground itself had to be conquered. The plateau at Giza was not naturally perfect, it had to be leveled. Engineers cut into the bedrock, creating a foundation so precise that the variation across the entire base is measured in fractions of an inch. The southeastern corner sits only slightly higher than the northwestern corner, a difference so small that even modern construction crews equipped with digital instruments and laser calibration struggle to replicate it across such an enormous surface. 13 acres of rock, leveled, without steel, without electricity, without machines. How? Surveyors likely used simple but effective tools: plumb bobs, sighting rods, and water-filled trenches to establish horizontal reference lines. Water, when still, does not lie. It finds level. The Nile taught them that. Geometry was not abstract to the Egyptians. It was survival. To align the pyramid, they turned their gaze upward. The Great Pyramid is oriented toward the 4 cardinal directions with astonishing precision. Deviation of less than 1/3 of a degree. Such accuracy suggests systematic astronomical observation. Imagine a clear night on the Giza Plateau. No city lights, no smoke, only stars. Egyptian astronomer priests watching the circumpolar stars. Those that never set, those that rotate eternally around the celestial pole. By observing the transit of specific stars across a vertical alignment tool, they could determine true north with remarkable accuracy. The heavens became their compass. The sky became their blueprint. How were the blocks lifted? No single answer satisfies every question. The most widely accepted explanation involves ramp systems. Long earthen ramps may have extended outward from the structure. Others suggest spiraling ramps encircling the pyramid as it rose. Still others propose internal ramp corridors built within the outer casing. Each theory addresses part of the puzzle. Imagine thousands of workers pulling sledges across compacted mud pathways. Experiments have shown that wetting sand significantly reduces friction. A team working in rhythm, chanting in unison, could move multi-ton stones steadily forward. Wooden rollers were unlikely at this scale, too unstable under heavy weight. Instead, sledges slid across prepared surfaces, stone by stone, layer by layer. The pyramid did not rise in a sudden burst. It ascended slowly, deliberately, a growing mountain of human intention. At its peak construction phase, the site would have been alive with motion, dust in the air, the sound of chisels striking limestone, supervisors directing teams, scribes recording deliveries, cooks preparing food for thousands. This was not merely construction, it was a living organism. Deep within the structure lies the king's chamber, constructed from massive granite blocks quarried in Aswan. Some of these beams weigh approximately 50 tons each. Above the chamber are 5 relieving spaces, layered one above another, designed to distribute weight and prevent collapse. This is advanced structural engineering. Load distribution, stress management, weight redirection. The builders understood that pressure moves, that stone compresses, that failure could be catastrophic. The bent pyramid at Djoser had already taught them caution. When structural instability appeared during its construction, they altered the angle midway. The visible shift in slope remains today, a permanent reminder that progress sometimes requires correction. By the time Khufu's pyramid rose, the lessons of earlier attempts had been absorbed. Perfection is rarely born in a single generation. It is refined across time. After Khufu came his son Khafre, who built the second pyramid at Giza around 2550 BCE, originally rising to 143.5 meters with a base of 215 meters. It appears taller than Khufu's because it was constructed on higher ground. Khafre's pyramid is remarkable for still retaining part of its original Tura limestone casing near the summit, offering a glimpse of its ancient brilliance. Inside, a descending passage leads to a granite-lined burial chamber, accompanied by subsidiary corridors and chambers. The pyramid complex included mortuary and valley temples connected by a long causeway. Most famously, Khafre commissioned the Great Sphinx, Abu al-Hawl, carved directly from the bedrock to guard his pyramid and the Giza Plateau. Over the centuries, the Sphinx endured erosion and damage, most notably the loss of its nose. While a popular myth blames Napoleon's cannons, historical evidence shows the nose was already missing long before his arrival, likely destroyed in the 14th century by a religious zealot. Despite this, the Sphinx has stood resilient for more than 4,500 years. A silent guardian of Giza. In 2510 BCE, the Giza Triad was completed by Khafre's son Menkaure, who built the third and smallest pyramid. Originally standing at 65 meters with a base of about 102 by 104 meters, it was constructed of limestone with a granite core and a casing of fine white limestone. Despite its modest size, Menkaure's pyramid is distinguished by its complex interior, chambers decorated with carved panels, a room with 6 niches, a granite-lined burial chamber. The pyramid complex also included temples and 3 subsidiary pyramids. Menkaure's reign left behind some of the most exquisite sculptures of the Old Kingdom, such as the celebrated statue of King Menkaure and his queen, symbolizing royal power and divine protection. Still, within these eternal monuments lay secrets and clever architectural tricks, hidden passages, false chambers, and intricate designs meant to mislead tomb robbers. Yet despite such ingenuity, most of these defenses ultimately failed. Over centuries, organized gangs and opportunistic thieves plundered treasures, artifacts, and sacred relics, leaving behind empty chambers where kings had once hoped their wealth would accompany them into eternity. Monumental ambition carried a cost, as pyramids multiplied across Egypt during the 4th, 5th, and 6th dynasties. Resources were stretched, provincial governors grew stronger, and central authority weakened. By around 2180 BCE, unity fractured, and the Old Kingdom dissolved into the First Intermediate Period, an era of political fragmentation and hardship. Yet the pyramids endured. Even as governments fell, famine struck, and order collapsed, Stone remained where power did not. For more than 4,500 years, the pyramids have witnessed civilizations rise and fall. Greek philosophers, Roman legions, Arab scholars, Napoleon's expedition, modern archaeologists, and tourists from every nation. And still the question lingers. How did they do it? Perhaps the deeper question is, how did they believe they could? Because belief precedes achievement. The pyramids are not supernatural anomalies, but the culmination of centuries of knowledge. Astronomy, mathematics, engineering, logistics, governance. Not magic, but mastery. Not extraterrestrial intervention, but human intelligence. Their greatest mystery is not hidden chambers, but the boundless reach of human determination, guided by purpose. On the windswept Plateau of Giza, a civilization dared to build against time itself, and time has not erased them. The pyramids stand not as riddles of the cosmos, but as monuments to what humanity, disciplined and united, can achieve. History is not shaped by speculation, but by evidence. Civilizations are not measured by the length of their years, but by the magnitude of their achievements. Some fade without leaving a mark. Others carve their names into eternity. And in the silent desert of Giza, the answer still stands, written in stone. Thank you for walking this journey through time. Until we meet again in the next chapter of the Pharaohs' history.